He let the match burn inches from the fuse, then looked straight at the woman he was forced to marry. Smoke stung his eyes as the barn crackled behind him, horses slamming against wood, iron ringing sharp in the dark. A shot split the night, too close, too fast, and dirt burst near his boots. He didn't flinch. He just kept looking at her. Like the fire wasn't the thing about to take everything. What he saw in that moment didn't make sense. Stay with me. This story isn't what you think. The church in Red Hollow was too small for the number of people packed inside it that afternoon. Dust clung to boots, hats stayed low, and no one spoke louder than a whisper, though every eye was fixed forward. A screen door creaked somewhere in the back. Wind slipped through the cracks, carrying grit across the wooden floor. It gathered near the front steps, where sunlight cut through the open doorway in a pale strip. Caleb Turner stood at the altar, shoulders squared, one hand resting lightly on the brim of his hat. He didn't shift, didn't clear his throat. Just stood there, still as a fence post driven deep into hard ground. He didn't look to his right. Not once. Lila Mae Johnson stood beside him in a dress that didn't belong to her. The lace collar sat too high on her neck. The sleeves hung loose at the wrists where the fabric had worn thin. Someone had tried to press it smooth, but the wrinkles had memory. Her hands stayed folded, not tight, not trembling, just still. A woman coughed in the second row. Someone else shifted on a bench. The sound of boots scraping wood echoed louder than it should have. Henry Whitaker stood near the aisle, arms crossed over his vest, watching like a man inspecting a purchase. His silver watch chain caught the light every time he moved. The preacher lifted his book, his voice low and careful, like he was afraid of breaking something already cracked. "Do you, Caleb Turner?" Caleb answered before the question finished. "I do," short, flat, like he was confirming the weight of a sack, not a vow. A murmur ran through the room, quick and sharp, then died just as fast. The preacher turned. "And do you, Lila Mae Johnson?" Lila didn't look at him. Her gaze drifted past the pews, past the hats and faces, out through the open door where the wind moved the dry grass along the road. A wagon rolled by somewhere in the distance, wheels grinding slow over dirt. Sand skittered across the steps. She watched it gather at the threshold. "Yes," she said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't fall. It simply landed. Caleb didn't turn, didn't nod, didn't even blink in her direction. The preacher paused a moment longer than needed, then closed the book. "Then by the authority vested in me." The words passed through the room without weight. People leaned forward anyway, waiting for something, anything, to break the stillness. Nothing did. No smile, no glance, no touch. When it was done, Caleb stepped back first. Just one step, enough to break the line between them. Lila remained where she was for a heartbeat longer, then turned toward the aisle. The hem of her dress brushed the floor, catching a bit of dust as she walked. No one clapped. A chair creaked. Outside, the wind picked up again, lifting a swirl of dirt into the air as the church doors swung wider. Henry Whitaker moved aside, giving them space to pass, his eyes flicking once between them, like he was measuring something unseen. Caleb walked ahead. Lila followed, a few steps behind. Not close enough to touch, not far enough to leave. On the porch, the sunlight hit hard. Caleb settled his hat properly this time, pulling the brim low against the glare. Still not looking at her. A horse shifted near the hitching post, reins clinking softly. Somewhere down the road, a screen door slammed. Lila paused at the top step. For a moment, she didn't move. The wind lifted a loose strand of her hair, brushing it across her cheek. She didn't fix it. Caleb was already walking. Not fast, Not slow, just steady. Like he knew exactly where he was going. Like it didn't matter who followed. She stepped down after him. The dust rose around their boots as they crossed the street, people parting without being asked. No one spoke to them. No one stopped them. Behind them, the church door creaked shut again, and the town of Red Hollow exhaled. But Caleb Turner never once turned his head. Not even once. The road out of Red Hollow stretched dry and pale under the late afternoon sun. Hooves pressed steady into the dust, the sound dull and even, like a clock ticking somewhere far off. Lila walked beside the wagon, one hand resting lightly on the worn wood rail. Caleb drove without looking down. The reins sat loose in his grip. The horse knew the road well enough. No one followed. Still, the silence stayed. They passed the last of the town buildings, the barber's pole, the narrow storefront with its crooked dry goods sign, the saloon door hanging half open. A man leaning against the post straightened as they went by, then looked away. The wind picked up past the edge of town. It came across the open land without anything to stop it. Dry grass bent low. A piece of paper tumbled across the road and caught against the wagon wheel before tearing loose again. Caleb didn't speak. Lila didn't ask. By the time they reached Dry Creek Ridge, the sun had dropped low enough to throw long shadows across the yard. The ranch sat quiet. A fence leaned at an angle near the gate. One hinge hung loose, creaking every time the wind shifted. Caleb stepped down first. His boots hit the dirt with a soft thud. He walked to the front door, pushed it open, and held it there. Lila paused a moment before stepping inside. The house smelled like wood, dust, and something faintly burned from the stove. A tin cup sat on the table, half full of cold coffee. A folded receipt from the general store rested beside it, edges curled. Caleb reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a key, and set it on the table. "It's yours to use," he said. That was all. He turned and walked back out before she could answer. The screen door slapped once behind him. Lila stood still in the center of the room. The wind slipped through a crack near the window, moving the edge of a curtain that had been mended more than once. She set her hand on the back of a chair. It wobbled under her touch. After a moment, she steadied it. Outside, Caleb dragged a chair onto the porch. The wood scraped against the boards. He sat down, leaned back, and stretched his legs out in front of him. Night came slow. Inside, Lila lit the lamp. The flame caught after a second try, flickering before settling. She moved through the room without hurry, opening the cupboard, checking the stove, lifting the lid off a dented pot. Empty. She rinsed it anyway. Water from the barrel tasted like iron. She poured some into the kettle and set it on the stove, listening to the faint crackle as the flame took. The roof began to tick as the night air cooled it down. Later, rain came without warning. Not heavy, but steady enough to find its way through the weak spots. A drop hit the floor near the far wall, then another. Lila moved a pan beneath it. Outside, Caleb didn't come in. The rain tapped against the porch boards, then softened. After a while, the sound changed. A slow drip, uneven. Lila looked up. Water slipped through a seam near the ceiling, running along a beam before falling again. She watched it for a second. Then she moved the table a few inches to the side. By morning, the rain had stopped. The sky came clear and pale. A thin line of light stretched over the ridge. Caleb stepped inside, boots damp at the edges. He paused just past the door. The floor was dry. The pan sat beneath the leak. The table had been shifted just enough to keep the water off its legs. On the stove, a kettle steamed low. Beside it, a tin cup. Clean. Waiting. Caleb walked over, picked it up, and poured. He didn't look toward the back room. Didn't call out. He took a sip, then set the cup down again. Outside, the hinge on the gate gave a long, tired creak. Old Ben Carter stepped through, pushing it open with one hand. He paused when he saw Caleb standing in the doorway. Then his eyes moved past him, into the house. "She staying?" Ben asked. Caleb didn't answer right away. Ben spat into the dirt, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and shook his head once. "You're stepping into something that don't walk away easy," he said. Caleb leaned one shoulder against the doorframe. "I'm not asking it to," he replied. Ben looked at him a long moment, then tipped his hat slightly and turned back toward the gate. The hinge creaked again as it closed. Inside, the kettle gave a soft hiss as the water settled. Lila stood in the back room, just out of sight. She didn't move, not until the sound of Ben's boots faded down the road. Then she stepped forward, slow, careful. Caleb was still standing there. For a moment, they faced the same direction, not speaking, not looking at each other. But the space between them felt different, not empty, not anymore. The change didn't come loud. It came in small things. The next morning, Caleb left before sunrise. The screen door eased shut behind him, quieter than the day before. The coffee pot sat where he'd used it, still warm. The cup beside it was clean again. Lila noticed. She didn't touch it right away. Outside, the wind had shifted. It carried less dust, more chill. A thin cloud line stretched low over the ridge, promising nothing but watching anyway. By mid-morning, she walked into town. Same road, same dry stretch. But this time, folks didn't look away fast enough. They watched. The general store bell rang when she pushed the door open. A few heads turned, then turned back, slower than before. Mr. Hargrove stood behind the counter, counting coins into a small leather pouch. He didn't stop, but his hands slowed. "What you need?" he asked. "Flour," Lila said, "and salt." He nodded once, reached for the sack, set it on the counter with more weight than needed. A woman near the fabric rolls leaned closer to another. Their voices dropped low, but not low enough. "That's her," one whispered. "The one from the church." Lila didn't turn, didn't answer. She set her coins down, exact count, no more, no less. When Hargrove handed the sack over, he didn't meet her eyes. Outside, a boy ran past and bumped the edge of the bag. It slipped from her grip, hit the step with a soft thud, spilling a thin line of flour across the wood. The boy froze. His mother grabbed his arm quick, pulling him back. "Careful," she said, not to him. Lila bent to lift the sack. Before she could, another pair of boots stepped into view. Caleb didn't speak. He just reached down, picked up the sack, and set it back in her hands. His fingers brushed the rough cloth, steady, unhurried. Then he stood beside her, not in front, not behind, just there. The whispers stopped. The woman by the window turned away first. Then the others followed one by one until the street went quiet again. Caleb didn't look at them. He didn't look at Lila either, but he didn't move. After a moment, she adjusted her grip on the sack. "Thank you," she said. He gave a small nod. They walked back without speaking. The road felt shorter. Back at Dry Creek Ridge, the wind had picked up again, carrying dry leaves across the yard. One of the fence posts leaned further than before. Lila set the flour inside, then stepped back out with a small shovel. She walked past the fence line, past the patch where the ground dipped slightly. She knelt, drove the shovel in. The soil broke easier than it should have. She dug once more, deeper this time, then pressed her fingers into the dirt. It held a faint coolness beneath the surface. She looked toward the ridge, then toward the dry stretch beyond it. When Caleb came back from the far end of the field, he found her there, kneeling, hands dirty, the shovel set aside. He stopped a few feet away. "What is it?" he asked. Lila brushed her palms together, slow. "Ground shouldn't give like this," she said. "Not here." He stepped closer, crouched down, pressed his hand into the same spot. She was right. He didn't say it, but he didn't argue either. "Water runs somewhere under," she added. "Not far." Caleb stood, looking out across the land like he was seeing it for the first time. The wind moved through the grass, low and steady. That afternoon, they worked the fence. No plans spoken out loud. He lifted the posts. She set them straight. The hammer slipped once in her hand, glancing off the nail. He reached at the same time she did. Their hands met. Not hard, not sudden, just there. For a second, neither moved. The hammer hung between them. The wind passed. Then she pulled back first, picked up the tool again, drove the nail in clean this time. Caleb stepped back, letting her finish. When the last post stood firm, he looked down the line, then back at her. Didn't say anything, but he stayed a little longer than he needed to. As the sun dropped low, the shadows stretched across the yard again. The fence stood straighter. The ground beneath it felt different. And somewhere between the quiet work and the still air, something had shifted again. Not enough to name, but enough to notice. The wind didn't settle that night. It came in long, restless breaths, slipping through the fence gaps, brushing against the dry boards of the barn, tugging at loose rope and hanging tack. The kind of wind that made a place feel uneasy without saying why. Caleb woke before the sound reached him. It was the smell. Smoke. Faint at first, then sharper. He sat up on the porch, boots hitting the wood hard, eyes already moving toward the barn. A glow flickered low against the dark. Then a shout from somewhere near the ridge. "Fire!" By the time Caleb reached the yard, the flames had climbed. Not wild yet, but hungry. Dry hay caught fast. The side wall of the barn glowed red, then orange, then burst into a crackling roar. Inside, the horses kicked against their stalls. The sound hit deep. Panic. Wood splintering. Iron striking iron. Caleb grabbed the latch, yanked it hard. It didn't give. "Hold on," he muttered, more to himself than anything. He stepped back, drove his shoulder into the door. Once. Twice. The wood groaned but held. Behind him, the wind pushed the flames higher. Then came the sound of hooves. Fast. Lila rode in from the far side, the old mare lathered, breath coming sharp. She didn't slow, didn't call out. She saw the fire, saw the horses, saw Caleb at the door. She turned before the thought finished. The back gate stood open, where the fence dipped toward the slope. The herd had broken through, a line of shadows moving fast in the dark, heading straight toward the narrow drop beyond the ridge. Lila kicked the mare forward. "Easy!" she shouted, voice cutting through the wind. "Easy now!" The first horse bolted past her, wild-eyed. She turned with it, circling wide, pressing it back, forcing it to slow. Another followed, then another. Dust and ash filled the air. The mare stumbled once, caught herself, pushed on. Lila leaned low, guiding, turning, her voice steady even as the fire's glow painted the ground behind her. Back at the barn, Caleb hit the door again. This time it cracked. Wood split down the middle. The latch gave. The door swung open just enough. A black stallion burst out first, nearly knocking him aside. He grabbed the rein, steadied it just long enough to keep it from running blind. "Go!" he shouted, slapping its flank. One by one, the rest followed. Some stumbled. Some kicked. But they cleared the doorway. By the time the last horse made it out, the roof had begun to sag. Caleb stepped back, breathing hard, eyes scanning the yard. Then he saw her, at the edge of the ridge. Lila rode ahead of the herd now, not chasing, but leading. The horses followed her line, slower, steadier, pulled back from the drop by something they trusted more than fear. She didn't look back, didn't check if he was watching. She just rode. When she finally brought them into the yard, the fire had begun to die down. The worst of it burned through. Smoke hung low, thick and heavy. Lila slid from the saddle. Her hands shook once, then stilled. "I got them," she said, breath uneven but voice holding. Caleb stepped closer. Ash streaked her cheek. A tear had cut a clean line through it, though she didn't seem to notice. "You shouldn't have," he started. She shook her head once. "If they'd gone over," she said quietly, "there'd be nothing left." He didn't answer. Around them, the town had begun to gather. Men with buckets, women with shawls pulled tight. No one spoke loud anymore. They watched the burned barn, watched the horses settling, watched her. No one laughed. No one whispered. Just silence. Old Ben stood near the gate, hat in his hands, eyes fixed on Lila like he was seeing her for the first time. From the far edge of the crowd, Margaret Whitaker stood still as stone. Her dress caught the firelight, pale against the dark. Her eyes didn't rest on the barn. They rested on Lila. Something sharp moved there, quick, hidden. By morning, the fire was out. The barn stood blackened, half gone. Smoke curled up in thin lines. Word spread faster than the wind. By noon, another kind of talk followed it. A man named Victor Crowley had been seen riding the outer lands, asking questions, measuring boundaries, offering coin where there hadn't been buyers before, and someone had told him where to look. Old Ben said it first, low, careful. "Whitaker girl's been talking too much," he muttered. Caleb didn't react, but his eyes shifted, just once, toward the road leading back to town. Lila stood by the fence, one hand resting on the wood they'd fixed the day before. The ground beneath it felt the same, but everything else had changed. Not just the fire, something deeper, something that had been waiting, now stirred. And not all of it was good. The morning came too quiet. No wind, no creak from the loose hinge. Even the horses stood still, heads low, as if the land itself had gone to listening. Caleb was already up, checking the fence line where the ground dipped. The soil Lila had pointed out days before sat darker than the rest. Not wet, not yet, but different. He crouched, ran his fingers through it. Then he heard the hoofbeats. Not many, but not friendly either. He stood, eyes narrowing toward the ridge. Lila stepped out of the house behind him, a cloth still in her hand from the basin. She didn't ask, just followed his gaze. 3 riders. They didn't hurry, didn't need to. The one in front wore a long coat despite the warming day. Dark, clean. Too clean for this part of land. Victor Crowley. He reined in just short of the fence. "Fine place you've got here," he said, voice smooth, almost easy. "Shame if the land don't hold." Caleb didn't move closer. "State your business," he said. Victor smiled a little, eyes drifting past him, settling on the ground, then on Lila. "I've already done that," he replied, "just seeing how far along things are." His men shifted behind him, one of them glancing toward the slope where the creek cut through rock below. Caleb followed the look. Then he saw it. A crate, half hidden behind brush. Another farther up the ridge. Not tools. Something heavier. He didn't speak. Victor tipped his hat once, like a man finishing a polite visit. "Wouldn't stay too attached," he said. "Land changes quick out here." Then he turned his horse and rode off, his men following without a word. The dust settled slow behind them. For a long second, neither Caleb nor Lila moved. Then she spoke, low. "They're not here for the land." He shook his head once. "They're here for what runs under it." By noon, Ben had come up from the lower ridge, breath tight, hat pulled low. "Men setting charges," he said. "Near the creek bend. I seen it." Caleb didn't ask questions, didn't waste time. He grabbed the rifle from the wall, checked the chamber, then handed another to Ben. Lila was already moving. Not toward the house. Toward the ridge. "Stay back," Caleb said. She didn't stop. "You know I won't," she replied. He watched her for a second, then nodded once. The climb was steep, loose rock underfoot, the sun pressing down harder as the day stretched on. They spread out without speaking. Ben took the left side. Caleb moved center. Lila climbed higher, finding ground where she could see below. The men were already there, 4 near the creek. One crouched low, working the fuse into a sack set against the rock. The water ran thin beneath them, quiet, unaware. Caleb raised his hand. "Wait." The man bent lower, match in hand. Lila didn't look away. Her breath slowed. The world narrowed. The match struck. A small flame. Moving. Closer. She didn't wait for the signal. The shot cracked across the ridge. Sharp. Clean. The sack burst before the fuse took hold. Dirt and smoke shot upward, knocking the men back, scattering tools, sending one scrambling down the slope. Ben fired next, then Caleb. The rest didn't stay. They broke fast, grabbing for their horses, leaving the crates behind. Within seconds, they were gone. Only the echo remained, and the creek, still running. Caleb lowered his rifle, looked up. Lila stood above him, steady, the rifle still in her hands. He let out a breath he hadn't known he'd been holding. "That was a clean shot," he said. She didn't answer, just lowered the rifle. Days passed. The town heard. They always did. This time, no one laughed. No one turned away. When Caleb and Lila rode in together, the street didn't part. It held. People watched. But not the same way. At the center of town, Caleb stopped. He stepped down from his horse. Lila did the same. They stood there a moment, the dust settling around their boots. No speech waited. No grand words. Caleb reached for her hand. Held it. Firm. Steady. "She stays," he said. That was all. No one argued. No one spoke. But no one laughed either. That night, the porch creaked under their weight as they sat side by side. The sky stretched wide above them, stars sharp and clear. The wind moved softer now. Across the field, the grass bent in slow waves. Lila rested her hands in her lap. Caleb sat beside her, not close enough to crowd, not far enough to leave. After a while, he shifted his hand. Not sudden, not forced, just enough. Her fingers met his, and this time, neither of them pulled away. The night settled around them like a quiet promise. No voices from town, no wind pushing against the walls, just the slow creak of the porch and the soft rhythm of two people who had finally stopped standing apart. If you had been there, sitting on those worn boards, looking out over that land that nearly slipped away, you might have felt it too. That moment when fear loosens its grip, When all the things people said, all the lines they drew, start to fade against something steadier. Because sometimes, it isn't the loud choices that change a life. It's the quiet ones. The ones where you stay, where you trust, where you reach out, and don't pull back. Caleb didn't win her over with promises. Lila didn't ask to be chosen. But somewhere between the fire, the dust, and the silence, they saw each other clearly. And once that happens, there's no going back to pretending. Maybe that's the part that stays with you. Not the fight, not the town, just that simple truth. That love, real love, doesn't ask for permission. It asks for courage. If you've ever had to stand your ground, or take someone's hand when it wasn't easy, tell me where you're watching from. And if this story stayed with you a little longer than most, there are more waiting just like it, out on the edge of memory, where people find their way back to something real. I'll see you there.